Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here, taking time out of your day to entertain yourselves with us and our staff as far as our annual budget goes. But we're here to answer some questions today and give you a little bit of a presentation on our fiscal year budget for 2023. One thing I want to talk about really is the title of our association, Recreation Centers of Sun City West. There's a couple words in there that what we feel and what we see oftentimes in the administrative offices that we operate. We're much more than recreation centers. And sometimes people believe that that's what we are. And some people who don't utilize the facilities and whatnot tend to come into our office and want refunds from their membership dues. I don't use the facilities, so why am I paying? Those types of things. We see that a lot. And then we also see things coming at us with the word city. Sun City West is the name of our association and the name of our area, but we are not a city. We do not control the streets. We do not control traffic signals. We do not pick up trash, repair sidewalks, pavement, those types of things that normally a municipal operation would. We are not that. And we get a lot of phone calls relative to those types of activities as well. And so moving on, I just want to kind of work on the educational portion of the program as far as really what we are. We're big. We are as big as a city, bigger than some in the state of Arizona and across the country. But in the world of Arizona, we are considered a planned community under the Arizona state statutes. And there are rules and regulations that apply to planned communities. So it's a real estate owned and operated by a nonprofit corporation, which is the association. And our units, our parcels, and our lots make you mandatory members, and you're required to pay assessments to the association for these purposes. And so all of the $150+ million worth of assets that we have belong to all of you all. Essentially a very gigantic HOA. And so if you've had any experience working in an HOA or for an HOA or with your neighbors and that type of thing, there's a couple of things I think that really kind of stand out. In your own little neighborhood, you're managing 20, 25 homes, 13 homes, down to 5 homes or whatever, you are very concerned about your property value, the look and appeal of your real estate, and its long-termness as far as keeping up that look. We do the same thing, but on a very grand scale. And so that is just on the educational portion of the program. I just want to make you all very aware on how these things and how we operate. So somehow you found this place, and I want to congratulate you all for doing that. This is a pretty good place to live, a very good place to live. And in the state of Arizona, I would consider this our premier active adult golf community. You don't find these places really, you're not going to find a duplicate of this in the state of Arizona. There are smaller samples. There are a larger sample, I think, in Florida, in the United States, but primarily in the Del Webb system, they're not this big. Sun City was the first. Del Webb, I think, learned a lot there, came out here, put those improvements to the test. And I think Del Webb should be complimented on everything that he's done, because what he's created in these types of environments are truly classics. They really are. But to consider that you can walk out your front door in your own personal golf cart and golf a different golf course every day of the week is remarkable. Truly remarkable. And the quality of these golf courses are phenomenal. And your property value basically is, I think, kept up by the quality of the facilities and all the amenities that we do have. So hats off to all the staff that do take care of that, and to all of you all, congratulations for living here. Later today, this is going to be a little bit of a tag team approach. I'm Bill Schwind, by the way. I didn't introduce myself. I apologize for that. I'm a general manager. We will have some staff members joining us in the presentation today. We'll have our accounting division. Cliff Swan will be doing primarily the heavy load lifting here as far as the slides go. Pete Finelli, our CFO, will be discussing our reserve fund, our APF fees, and the future. on where we sit and where we project to be. Todd Patty will be talking about all of our golf courses and some of the improvements going on currently, as well as what we're planning for 2023. And Carl Wilhelm, our project manager, will be talking about a lot of the CIP projects that are being proposed here today. We'll answer any and all of your questions. Once we get through this slideshow, I'll have staff come up. I think Russ, you'll in the back too. If anyone has any facility questions, just join us here. Staff will take these seats and we'll hopefully answer any and all of your questions. So what we do, I think you can all be very, very proud of as being owners here. We do take a lot of pride in the conditions of our facilities, and I think it shows. You bring visitors in or people come and visit Sun City West, they are truly amazed as far as what they find. And yes, Martin, thank you. We are more than golf. We have tremendous, tremendous facilities. I think the swimming pool here at R.H. Johnson, whether you see it during the daytime fully used or at night, that does help sell a lot of properties here. This place is beautiful. As are our other recreation centers, again, golf courses and all of the sports amenities that we do have. There's a very long list of amenities that we do take care of, and I think people enjoy immensely. A recent survey by an independent life insurance group analyzed over 2,600 communities like us, 55 and over. And they did a whole bunch of assessments on affordability, amenities, and security features. And Sun City West came out number 2 nationally out of the 2,600. Villages of Florida was 1, and here we are number 2. And this was an independent study, again, done by some insurance groups. And, you know, I think we are very, very proud to be recognized that way. And I think if anyone comes and tours our facilities, they too would see what these folks also saw. So when it comes to the responsibility of what we do, right, we look at the revenue that we gather, our cost elements of the association, and we develop an income statement annually to make sure that the association is financially sound and that we are operating in a good business sense. There are a lot of moving parts here in the association. We manage the CC&R divisions to make sure that properties are kept well. Again, all of our facilities, all of our facility maintenance, new construction and renovations, as well as all of our financial necessities needed to comply with federal and state law, as well as planning for the future in our reserve study. So there is a lot going on every day. People coming in, we got close to 28,000 members, and every month, you know, their individual dues are due, so we get a lot of walk-in traffic. We get a lot of use online through our IT services now, making things a little bit more convenient for folks. And so we continue to make those types of improvements every day. Overall, we got about 476 employees. 192 of those are full-time, and that is a moving number. They come and go, obviously. We do have openings. If you know of anybody, or if anybody needs a little bit more something to do during the day, we'd love to have you. But us, like anyone else in the country, are struggling for that personnel labor. There's a lot of competition out there in the market, and this is one of our larger challenges as we sit here today. We are a 7-day-a-week business, open from 5 or 6 in the morning till 9 at night. We run a lot of shifts, and there's a lot of things to do. So we are a very people-based organization. And when I say a lot of things to do, this is kind of just a little bit of a touch on what we do administrate. There are a lot of administrative issues that we deal with, from insurance to legal obligations and ongoing expenditures, our guest registrations, our visitors, our HR department. Obviously, this sheet speaks for itself. A lot of properties to take care of, utilities that we pay for, whether people are using the facilities or not, whether they're open or closed. We do have all of those scenarios to take care of, all of our golf courses and all of the recreational programs that we offer, and assisting all the clubs with their needs and wants. So it is a very active community, and it is very, very busy. So when it comes to the budget, right, our primary goals, right, preserve and protect. Enhance the assets of the association. That is key and critical, right? We meet or exceed the minimum reserve funding requirement, again, established by the governing board. Mr. Finelli will get into that a little bit, but when it comes to the reserve funding, and I talked about it a little bit earlier, the reserve fund is very, very important to us. And so any savings that we have on our budget annually gets imported into the reserve study to help offset upcoming costs that we know we need as far as repairs in the future or any kind of new construction. The last thing we want to do, relating again back to the HOA scenario, is we don't want to go knocking on your door and asking you for a special assessment. Smaller HOAs need to do that. If their irrigation systems fail, they don't have enough money in reserves, they have to pay for it somehow, and they come knocking on your door, and your monthly HOA fees independently go up. That's not the association, that's an independent thing. But when you look at what we do, we don't want to do that. We want to make sure we've got enough planning in place and enough preparation that we don't have to come knocking for additional funding from you. So again, this will all be explained as we move on through this presentation, but that's kind of where we're at. So we invest annually in new capital, which keeps this facility looking new, looking sharp, and answering to a lot of the contemporary needs and wants of the owner members here. And we strive to maintain the Sun City West standards that I touched on earlier with those pickleball court photos and Palm Ridge facilities and golf courses and those types of things. So putting the budget together, we have some assumptions and proposals ahead of us. We've got, on our expense side, we have wage adjustments, some mandated by the state of Arizona and others to keep us competitive with a very tough market trying to find employees to work. Health insurance premiums, thanks to COVID and other things across the nation, health insurance companies have increased their premiums across the network, and that unfortunately includes us as well. Overall inflation, we all know that story. We hear it every night on the news. And then specific line item expense changes have taken its toll on us. I know we were here in this room dealing with the governing board several months ago prior to the overseeding of our winter grass for the golf courses, and we did see a tremendous increase as far as the price of grass seed when it comes to that. But what Todd's facing on a daily basis with a lot of his fertilizers and all the things needed to take care of the golf courses, those prices have jumped from the building cost and the supply chain things that we're trying to deal with. How long it takes us to repair a window now is just ridiculously stupid. We just can't get glass. It takes days and days and weeks and into the months to get a repair on a window or ordering new windows. It's just a challenge for us, as it is for everyone. So on the revenue side, we did stay flat last year due to the COVID scenario. We are looking at a $28 membership due increase this year. Golf rounds remaining steady with an increase in golf fees. So a lot of those increases that Todd was seeing regarding grass seed and other fertilizers and such, we did have meetings with our golf committee, and they also agreed to increase the golf fees to help the users of the golf courses help offset that $600,000 increase. So that's all positive. We're seeing a little bit of an increase in golf fees for the owner members and a little bit bigger increase for the folks that do not live here playing as outside guests. So that should generate a little bit of coin for us to help offset these costs, which is good. The bowling lineage also seeing some fee increases along those lines, and I think when Cliff gets talking, you'll see bowling is pretty much a flat scenario. The expenses in our sports pavilion and bowling center pretty much pay for themselves. And then an increase in the APF fees, and that is for the new folks coming in. I think we did jump that, was it $300, Pete? Up to a $4,000 number. And again, Mr. Finelli will touch on that as far as what he's seeing as far as housing sales and how many we're actually coming in as far as the new folks. I'm going to hand this off to Mr. Swan and he can get into a lot of the budget detail, and we'll be back.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Bill, for giving some context to what I'm about to talk about here. Let's get right into it. Right here we have an income statement. Basically, from this income statement, you can see the projected 21-22 fiscal year, which is this year, and then our budgeted fiscal year for next year. And this year we're projecting a $2.3 million cash inflow and budgeting for fiscal year 22-23 a $1.4 million inflow. Off to the right, you'll see some specific changes and proposals that we'll be talking about in this presentation. Okay, so when we originally proposed this budget to B&F back in February, one of the key pieces, one of the key pieces of feedback we received from them was, because this was such a kind of a extraordinary year we were budgeting for, they recommended really coming out with some kind of visual data analytics for the community to help give some context and explain some of the things that we budget for and what those challenges are. So, this slide is one of those. So here you can see 63% of our overall expense is attributable to salaries, wages, and benefits. We are in the service industry, and people is our biggest asset. So here you can clearly see that. This pie chart illustrates all of our other expenses if you factor out payroll and what percentage they make up of our total budget. I've called out 5 here that are going to be impacted most by our current year budget, upcoming budget. So you have utilities, landscape maintenance, repairs and maintenance, operating expenses, and credit card fees. This pie chart illustrates our expense by division. So we have 4 divisions. We have admin, which is made up of general administrative expenses and membership. We've got rec centers, which are 4 rec centers and all the amenities associated with those rec centers. The sports pavilion, and golf. This pie chart illustrates our revenue by division. Again, admin revenue is driven by membership revenue. And then you've got rec centers, sports pavilion, and golf. How many of you knew that golf made up 39% of our overall revenue? I like this slide because it shows the revenue and expense side by side for each division. Where the expense exceeds the revenue, this creates a subsidy. The divisions that make up our subsidies are our amenities: golf, rec centers, and sports pavilion. Taking a look at that subsidy, this pie chart shows the percentage that each of those amenities makes up, the percentage of the subsidy each of those amenities makes up. Rec centers at 83%, sports pavilion almost break even, which Bill talked about earlier, and then golf at 16%. Now that we've talked about the financial structure of the association, let's get into some of the details of the budget. We'll start with the proposed membership increase. Keep in mind that there was no increase last year coming off of COVID. We're proposing a 5.6% increase, bringing the current rate from $4.97 to $5.25. This $28 increase will generate an additional revenue to help us address those challenges. When compared to the surrounding communities, we feel the proposed rate is a great value for what we have to offer. As I mentioned before, our proposals address operational challenges with wage adjustments, labor shortages, health insurance premiums, overall inflation, and supply chain impacts. There's some real challenges that we have to address coming up in this fiscal year budget. Remember, 63% of our overall expense is attributable to people. This chart illustrates our full-time equivalents, or FTEs, for the last 8 years. As you can clearly see, we are having trouble filling seats, unlike any other service-based industry. $291? That's the budget. Yes, 291 is the budget. Remember, FTEs. Okay. Yeah, we'll talk about that. We'll finish up here and then we'll talk about that. But FTEs that's not 291 people, that's 291 full-time equivalents. So you've got a 40-hour week being the FTE equivalent, and then if you have 2 part-time employees at 20 hours a week, they make up 1 FTE, just to give some context there. Okay. Now, if we want to attain that goal that Bill talked about of maintaining the standards of rec centers of Sun City West, we have to be able to compete in the job market. This is a job ad for Amazon. Here you can clearly see their starting hourly wage is at least $15 an hour. They provide health care on day 1, up to 20 weeks of paid parental leave, and fully funded college tuition. How do we compete with that? Well, to retain our employees and compete in the job market, we are budgeting the following. As of July 1, we're going to take a look at our salaries and wages, all of our positions, and anyone who's a full-time employee not at $15 an hour will come up to $15 per hour as a starting full-time employee rate. Again, I want to stress, full-time employee. Then we're going to take a look at the rest of the positions and do a market adjustment where needed or where necessary. Again, we have to be able to compete in this job market. And also, the cost of having to replace an employee that leaves is tremendous. So we want to retain our employees because we've invested in them. We're also budgeting a performance-based wage adjustment, which we do at the beginning of every year, at the beginning of every calendar year, of up to 5%, and then as well as addressing, we know there's going to be a minimum wage adjustment. We're thinking that's going to be around 6%. One of the other challenges we have is healthcare. So healthcare premiums increased 20% this year, starting in January. We are estimating or budgeting a 15% increase as of January 1, 2023. One of the measures that we took is we enacted a change in our employee contribution ratio. So it used to be prior to January 1, 2022, our employees picked up 20% of the premium. 20% of the premium. We took a look at that and decided that it was hard to give a 4% increase in pay and then take it all back with the increase in insurance premium. So at that time, we decided that we would do a 15%. We would change that ratio to 15% to help retain our employees and attract new employees. We'd like to budget that for this next fiscal year. In addition to the labor pressures, another challenge that we are facing is in repairs and maintenance. The inflationary and supply chain pressures are driving up costs. So in addition to, we basically took a 5% inflationary increase across the board. And there are some other specific things that we need to address. Palm Ridge parking lot seal and stripe. We need to we need to do that to get more longevity out of that asphalt that we just put down, and then as well as a cart path repair at Deer Valley, concrete cart path repair. Again, the services that we don't provide in-house, that we subcontract out, those subcontractors are facing the same pressures that we are with the environment that we're in, with inflationary pressures and supply chain issues, wage adjustments. So again, anytime we look outside to get something done, those are going to increase as well. Utilities are our second largest operating expense. You may have heard Bill say before, we're people in power. I mean, that's what we are. That's what our two largest expenses are here. So, naturally, the supply chain and inflationary pressures are going to impact these expenses as well. Fortunately, we have some operational efficiencies, some capital investments we've made at Koontz and Palm Ridge with lighting projects, and we really have experienced some great efficiencies due to that. And then we've proposed the upcoming R.H. Johnson LED lighting project in this fiscal year capital budget that I'm talking about now that will also give us efficiencies. We are budgeting additional costs and operating expenses for our club software and address IT infrastructure issues. The facility is 40 years old, and we do a great job keeping it up, but we really need to invest in some of our IT infrastructure. It is 40 years old, and it shows. It doesn't show by the naked eye, but it shows in some of the services that we provide here. We could do a better job for you guys in the community and become more efficient. So, we're, in addition to the investment in the club software, we're also budgeting some IT infrastructure improvements. We're going to convert our facilities to fiber. So Cox has pulled fiber has dropped fiber into the community, and we have to connect to that. So we're going to invest in that, as well as a 4G contingency in the event of an outage. So some of you may have experienced being at one of the golf courses or being in the rec center, and they can't process your transaction because the system's down, right? So the system is housed here, and when that system goes down, all the satellite facilities go down. So with this 4G contingency, it'll allow us to roll over to a 4G wireless solution, which will give us continuity and drastically reduce those scenarios. All right, so credit card expenses. How many of you knew that our credit card expenses are $500,000 a year? I mean, making the transaction process easier comes at a cost. I mean, this is an expense we have. We have to budget for it. But history tells us, the transaction process tells us that this is an expense that we should invest in because it allows us to be more efficient. It allows us to have our cash sooner. It minimizes our risk for bad checks and bad debt. Also, a lot of the members get benefits from this, right? I mean, they have points or travel points or cash back or whatever. So there's a lot that goes into this, but I put it in here to point out the fact that, as our revenue increases, our credit card fees are going to increase. That's part of it. Now let's talk about golf. So we went to the golf committee with some of the challenges earlier on in this calendar year, and everybody agreed that, the golfers should participate in those challenges, and the solution of those challenges. So we came out of there and collaborated with a $2 per round increase on average per member and $4 for outside playing guests. Keep in mind, coming off no increase from the prior year, and we also estimated the rounds to be at 320,000 rounds. when we look at that rate increase proposal, this is how we shake out in terms of comparable communities. Now, we're fiscal year end June 30, so these charts show our increase, but surely these other courses will increase their rates in their upcoming budgets. We don't know what that'll be right now, but this is how we compare right now. So we're still very competitive in our resident rate and our guest rate. You can see Sun City West there in the middle. So, and I would argue that you get the quality of a Sun City Grand or better here for those rates. So you get a great value for those rates. And this is why our rounds have grown over the last 2 years and why we continue to forecast 320,000 rounds for this budget. Now, some of those challenges we talked about with the golf committee were grass seed, fertilizers, chemicals, anything petroleum based. I mean, Bill talked about some of these specific line items earlier. We can't just satisfy it with a 5% inflationary increase across the board. We have to address some of these specific items. And talking with Todd and his team, I mean, these things aren't going up 5, 10, 180% on some of these things. It's insane, you know, but again, this is the environment that we're in. These are the things that we have to budget for and we have to address. I made a joke last time. I'm going to do it again. Now let's roll into bowling. No? Okay. Well, anyway, so you know, we have been pleasantly surprised with the popularity of our bowling leagues. You know, Barry and his team this year have just really knocked it out of the park over there. And the community is really engaged in bowling, which is great. And again, bowling pretty much pays for itself, which is pretty awesome when you're talking about an amenity in the community. Okay? So, that being said, they're not immune from these inflationary pressures, supply chain pressures. They're experiencing the same things, wage pressures as well. So, met with the sports pavilion. They came back with a 7% increase across the board, average 7% increase, and we're going to hold the rates steady at the 265,000 lines, and you know, we feel good about that bowling will continue to pay for itself. Okay, how many of you have gone to some of the events here? Yeah, so Casey and her team put that on, and I got to tell you, I went to help out at one of the events because we were short on people. But I went to help out at one of the events, and I was amazed at the quality and just the event itself, how it was put on. And I think our events team does a great job. And coming off of COVID this year, we weren't able to, we were unsure, because you have to schedule these events in advance, right? So we weren't sure what the future looked like at the time rolling into this year. But in our next fiscal year, we're open for business and events. And we're really going to push hard to provide more events to the community. And we've also made an investment in a ticketing system that will really help push those tickets and get them targeted to our members versus having them wide open to the public, and then be able to capitalize on the tickets that we sell to the public as well. So this is really going to drive revenue for us this year. We feel really good about it. Okay, now I'm going to hand over to Pete Finelli, and he's going to talk about some of the capital portion of the program. Thank you.
Thank you again, Cliff. Also sitting here is Terry, our accountant. We really want to thank all of our staff. Terry, who assembled a lot of the data, met with all the managers. Every line item in there is drilled down, and the outcome is a lot of hard work and capital projects with Carl and Todd and Russ and all their staff. So I just want to reiterate that this is not just a 1 week process. We started on this back in July, and appreciate y'all coming out to see what we've got. So again, good morning, everybody. And as Cliff alluded to earlier, the current FY 21-22, the year we're in, operating margins projected to be about 2.3 million. I'm not sure how many of you know, but by policy, all of the operating excess is infused into the reserve funds to help funding future repair and replacement, as well as the new capital needs for the association. As you can see, we're anticipating an FY 22-23 budget of about 1.4 million. I'd argue the vast majority of this is coming from a reduction, or of this reduction is due to our investment in our staff, which, as Bill has alluded to, is the #1 asset for the association. On this slide, you can see our 1.4 million out to the far right is in line with operating margins from the past 10 years. The green line is the operating revenues. The red line is our operating expenses. You can also see that the operating margin is quite consistent throughout the years. And once again, it's a very critical component of funding the inflows for our reserve funds. Many associations have dedicated portions of their dues that go specific to repair and replacement. We do not. The reserve funds pulls that component strictly off of the operating margin. Some of this was discussed a little bit earlier, but another very key component of our reserve fund inflows are the asset preservation fees, commonly referred to as APFs. These fees are mostly associated with house sales or title transfers, and they're critical to the repair and replacement funding for the association. Currently, they represent upwards of 70% of our overall reserve fund inflows. In the current year, the strong housing market has been very beneficial to this funding, and transactions have been in the 1,400 or so range. The Budget and Finance Committee did look at our reserve fund modeling and recommended an increase of $300 to $4,000 per transaction for the upcoming budget year. Even with this increase, we're very competitive with surrounding communities. And equally important, it's not something we ever want to occur, but it is anticipated the housing market may slow in the upcoming year. We all know or seeing the interest rate rises. Mortgage rates now over 5, and not too long ago they were in the mid-2s. Home prices, you all know about that and have benefited from a lot of the amenities that come with this association, and also a very tight inventory. And all of these we do project will have an impact on transactions. Again, we certainly would like to continue with a higher rate as everybody in the association benefits from those inflows. And moving to the reserve funds themselves, just a reminder that our rec center policies mandates how these funds are invested. They're very specifically defined in FI policies. You can see them online under governing board docs if you ever have an interest. But #1 of the criteria spelled out is protection of principal. And so the investments are done with that in mind. Keep going the wrong way, I'm sorry about that. So how we analyze the adequacy of the reserve funds to fund the future needs of the association is measured in the industry by what's called a fully funded balance percentage. FFB is the acronym we reference. This computation of that percentage is made up of the reserve funds themselves, divided into the estimated cost to replace the approximately 1,200 or so line items within our reserve study. The industry standard for an acceptable FFB percentage is generally in the 30 to 70% range. As we exit out of fiscal year 22, the year we're in, we anticipate being in the 55% range. And with this proposed budget, we anticipate ending in the 52% range. Again, policy of the rec centers mandates that the funding percentage remain above a 40% threshold. So after the budget year and looking out over the next 5 years, the rec centers should remain well above that base floor. So that's a quick update on that, and I think Bill wanted to summarize some completion of our budget presentation, and then we'll certainly entertain some questions.
All right. A couple of pictures just to touch on some of the recent improvements that have been made. This beautiful new driving range tee was put down. I like the color because it's green. We're talking about money, so it kind of made sense. But one of the things that we're dealing with on a big time basis here is the Arizona Department of Water Resources. And as you know, we live in a desert. I've lived here for a very long time and know it quite well. But in 2025, things change for us. Things change for the state of Arizona when it comes to water use. And you're hearing it on a daily basis in the news, and drought conditions, and Southern California is going through a bunch of crazy stuff right now, and Las Vegas and those types of things. Our governor's putting together a water committee and that kind of thing. But the Arizona Department of Water Resources is our needle. That's our guiding light. And so years ago, Mike Whiting and some attorneys and our governing boards were wise enough to secure water rights for the association. We don't pay EPCOR. You all do for residential water and those types of things as far as delivery and your septic systems and your sewer systems, and that is all administratively different than what we're talking about today. Groundwater is what comes out of the ground based on the wells that Todd has in his delivery system to irrigate our golf courses, which there are plenty, right? But we do have ample water availability from the ground coming up to irrigate our golf courses. And that is going to change when it comes to being monitored in the upcoming years. People who want to build a new subdivision in the state of Arizona, if they want to put a golf course piece of property in, they're going to be restricted to how much turf they can actually put on the ground and irrigate. 90 acres is going to be the limit for golf courses as far as your ability to irrigate. We are very, very lucky that half of our golf courses, some of the newer ones, are kind of desert formatted, where they're not wall-to-wall turf, right? They're more of a target areas with a lot of desert landscaping around there, and those courses meet the standard set aside by the ADWR. We have older courses, be it Grandview, Echo Mesa, Pebble Brook, that were built early 80s and even before, that we consider what we call wall-to-wall turf, right? Whole property is turf. And so we have to extract some of that or not irrigate it coming up. And within this budget, you'll see we're taking on Grandview as our first point of entry into this system. So some turf is going to be removed around the perimeters and that kind of thing, moving this thing forward so we are in compliance. But what Pete was talking about, and some other folks that have raised a recent opinion in the Independent, that talk about our reserve study and how we go about funding that. It is those savings that we have out of our annual budget that go fund our reserve study. Again, we're not coming knocking on your door asking for a special assessment. We have accounted for a lot of the upcoming expenses that we know we need. when Russ knows when air conditioners are about to go out, and we have hundreds of them, we budget for that. And that's what the reserve study covers, to make sure we are taking care of the amenities here within the association. So, and when we do so, I think, in a very, very high quality. Case in point, any of the new improvements that you've seen at our golf courses are absolutely tremendous. Again, we'll touch on the aquatic facility here at R.H. Johnson and recent water conservation moves that have been taking place to eliminate erosion, to help with water consistencies and storage as far as us irrigating, using these ponds to irrigate. Our water are absolutely tremendous, eye-catching, and they really, really do enhance the venues that we do have. So I would like to introduce now Todd Patty, who will talk a little bit about some of the upcoming proposed golf capital improvement plans, and then Carl Wilhelm will talk about all of the other non-golf related amenities. Mr. Patty.
All right, thank you, Bill, and good morning. My name is Todd Patty. I'm the Environmental Services Manager for Sun City West, and that is the care and maintenance of the 7 golf courses, along with the Landscape Division, which takes care of some of the roadways, entryways, the rec centers, lawn bowling, softball field, and those kind of things. Today, I'm going to go over the proposed capital project items for golf maintenance in the 2022-23 budget. And the first one that we have is the Grandview, the one that Bill was just mentioning, the Grandview project, irrigation and turf reduction. And the irrigation system over at Grandview, it is the original system. It's about 38 years old. And so the useful life of an irrigation system here in the desert Southwest ranges between 20 and 30 years. So we are long overdue for replacement. And that's everything. That's all the laterals, the main lines, the heads, the valves, the pump station, all the software programs, everything that goes along with the irrigation system. Along with that, we're replacing the irrigation system. We'll be removing approximately 40 acres of turf over there. As Bill mentioned, those are going to be on the perimeters of the golf course, and some of the street fronts and roadways is where we're going to pick up that 40 acres. So we're trying to keep the golf course as playable as possible and have a very small impact to the homeowners that live around Grandview Golf Course. So I think when it's said and done, I think it's going to have a very good look to it. Removing the 40 acres will put us in compliance with EDWR's 5th management plan, which is scheduled to go into effect January 1st of 2025. The next one is shoreline repair and replacement over on Grandview number 14T. We would do this project in May of 2023 when we're closed for the big project, the irrigation and turf reduction project. We'd do that alongside of that for $177,000. This picture here is one that we just did last summer over on number 14 green area, the upper and lower lake on number 14 at Trail Ridge. We have a total of 43 lakes on all 7 golf courses. To date, we have completed 14 of those lakes with some form of hardscape, either the split face block wall or the riprap application that we've done in some of those. Number 8 over at Echo Mesa would be an example of the riprap application. Shoreline projects help stop erosion and also conserve water. So when we're doing these lakes, we're saving a lot of water because we're reducing the seepage that we have on those lakes. And so if you put that together with the new irrigation projects and some of the other things that we do to conserve water on a daily basis, that's what helps us stay under our allotment that is issued by the state. All right, our golf maintenance equipment plan. All replacement units are listed on the reserve study. Pete was just talking about the reserve study and how that's all put together. We review that replacement plan every year, and we determine which units that are on that study for that year replacement can be moved out to next year or another year beyond that. And so if we have equipment that's running and we're not putting a lot of money into it for repairs, we'll move that out to another year. Just because it's on a reserve study doesn't mean that we have to replace it. So this year we're able to move about 4 units, mostly mowers, out to another year, and that saved us about $200,000. You can see that we have 31 total golf maintenance equipment scheduled for replacement this year, and that's pretty consistent with what we've done over the past several years. Average of 4 units per golf course, and the average replacement cost is about $179,000 per golf course. And that includes tractors, mowers, blowers, top dressers, those kind of things that we use on a daily basis to maintain our golf courses. And then, so as a total, we're looking just over $1 million for equipment. And then our utility vehicles, the light duty and heavy duty vehicles that we use every day on the golf course, are about $234,000. There's a couple transportation vehicles in there as well. And then this just a little bit of detail, shows which golf course and what they're getting, and then also the cost of the unit. And some more detail on the vehicles too, location and cost as well. And then in golf operations, we have some rental cart replacements. We're looking at 20 carts replacing this year for a total of $123,000. And that's primarily for the outside play program that we have on our golf courses. And now I'll turn this over to Carl.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Carl Wilhelm, project manager for the rec centers. I serve underneath the facilities maintenance team. Russ Boston, my direct report, who leads us all in, not just myself in capital project management, but also the 13, 14, 15 guys and people that do the daily repairs, things behind the scenes. It's a pretty amazing team that we have, and there's a lot of work that goes together in planning these future capital provisions. So all of the capital items being proposed this year in the 23 budget have come from a lot of compilation of club discussions, property committee meetings, the follow through of what the assessment of the costs are with the properties committees. With the budget and finance committee, until we get to our final list that the governing board has had multiple months to review. So it's my pleasure to show you what's being proposed in next year's budget. The R.H. Johnson parking lot, number 2, which is between the automotive club and continues through men's club, pickleball, the library, and the common drive out to R.H. Johnson. We propose a $915,000 asphalt mill and replacement, very similar to what you might have experienced at Palm Ridge last year. This will be a couple phase approach so that we are not a huge impact at one time to the residents. Phase 1 would be from the automotive club through the common drive at Meeker, and take that from demolition all the way to new asphalt and striping. And then begin phase 2, which would be the library parking lot through the common drive at R.H. Johnson Boulevard. This is a 290,000 square foot parking lot. This project is currently out for bid, and the importance of that is Bill alluded to what we're dealing with as far as material availability and labor shortages. And getting this plan for the summer, of the mixture of projects that we average per year in new capital and repair and replacements, about 30 to 40 projects on an annual basis. We try to do as many of these projects so that it's not an impact to the residents and get them done during the summer months. So again, out for bid, planning to get on their calendars for this summer. Moving on. We have the R.H. Johnson Recreation Center interior lighting, $370,000 proposed in the budget. This converts the last of our rec centers, R.H. Johnson facilities, to LED fixtures. So these lighting elements that you see in the rooms that you're in every day in this room, these are old fluorescent lights. They consume a lot more energy. In fact, approximately 2 times as much energy as a converted fixture to LED. So it has been proven in our utility bills that we've seen a pretty good change in decreasing costs of utilities for lighting and electric due to the conversions of our buildings and our parking lot lighting. I also manage all of the roof maintenance for the rec centers. We have a lot of buildings and a lot of roofs. In this particular budget, we have the R.H. Johnson Arts and Crafts flat roof restoration, $156,000. What this does for us is it maintains our average 10-year warranty on the roof structure. We average approximately a 12 to 15 year life after restoration. And what it does is keeps us from having to actually replace the very expensive engineered roofing system. So by good maintenance, by doing an average restoration every 10 to 15 years, this keeps us from having the larger expense of actually tearing off all those materials, air conditioning units, and putting down all the elements and membrane to get a new roof. Over at R.H. Johnson Mini Golf Lighting, also a conservation program. This has a lot of benefits for us in providing this project. Not only are we getting the energy savings by going from metal halide lighting to LED, but some of the other components is Musco Lighting provides LED lighting that is 100% controllable. So the lighting demographics that they put on paper for us is what we end up seeing. So we don't get the spillage. We won't have the lighting shining into the neighbors' yards with their product. And their product also comes with a maintenance-free 10-year warranty. So anything should happen to their lights, there is no cost to us for 10 years. That is their guarantee. They have proven that with other products that they've installed for us already. And one of their primary areas that they just did a project for us is the interior lighting at the Beardsley Pool. And what an amazing change that made for that pool part of our rec centers. Moving on, we have the Deer Valley Pro Shop parking lot asphalt mill and replacement. Very similar work going to be done that we're doing at R.H. Johnson. This is being scheduled in accordance to golf operations and golf maintenance's schedule for aerification or the work that they're doing on the course. I believe this course is closed for summer projects. So $114,000 to replace that asphalt and make it new again. And then moving on from the repair and replacement items that we just discussed, these are the new projects coming up. We've had an overwhelming concern of these 2 fencing areas in our southern boundary parts of the community. You can see here that these dead-end streets have old cyclone fence. They're in pretty poor condition. They keep getting damaged by others, people trying to sneak or break their way into our community. This is a disturbance to the residents. It's unsightly, and we would like to convert this over to masonry walls. What you see on the other side of those, of our property there, is basically businesses that have bought the land and developed it from the Grand Avenue side of things. And so working with Maricopa County, the fire department, and getting all approvals for $75,000, we would like to convert these to sealed masonry walls. Over at the metal shop, the parking lot asphalt mill and replacement, again, full demo and replacement. This comes after the new metal shop addition, which is currently completed. The parking lot took a lot of abuse from the heavy vehicles and construction over there, and in general, really wasn't going to make its full life, which was expected to be replaced 2 years from now. So we've bumped this up, and we're going to we're proposing to have this done this summer. That way the metal shop is up and running. They have no more closures. They have a new addition and a new parking lot. $52,000. Over at Beardsley Arts and Crafts Storage, this is a new request. This came from staff. You can see down in the bottom right-hand corner of that photo, we have a storage area. That storage area contains trash enclosure, our personal items for use in the Beardsley Park, grills, chairs, tables, and it is constantly being broken into. It has a masonry wall. It's approximately 5.5 feet tall. We propose to put nice decorative barbed ironwork on top to extend it up to about 8 feet and make it much more secure, along with a new gate. And with that being said, then they'll be able to park their vehicles securely inside the storage yard as well. And that's it for new requests. Moving on to the yearly allowances. A bit of an explanation of allowances are capital line items for unknown items that could come up throughout the year. They include things like ADA requirement changes, golf well pumps if they go down, IT needs for the community that are unexpected, safety and structural components of our structures and buildings and properties. An example of safety and structural, I don't know if you noticed at Palm Ridge over the last year, we had excavated the foundation a couple of feet around the whole entire aquatics building. It appeared that just age and time were making the paint flake off the base where irrigation and sun exposure impacts portions of our building. But after we did a little further investigation, we actually had age and time was the biggest thing. It's a very humid environment. It made old rebar inside of the foundation swell from rusting, and it created our foundation to pop away from the building. So we had an engineer assess and evaluate, gave us a plan, and we used safety and structural allowance funds to restore that building's foundation. We also have facility improvements that come up. They're either requests from the governing board or clubs, unexpected, that get approved. Energy conservation allowance, just in case there's a room maybe that got missed, or a need for making cost efficiencies for our lighting. And then finally, equipment needs that are unexpected. So that covers our capital project allowance, and I thank you for your interest in this year's budget. So, Bill?
Advance one more.
Any questions? You got it.
All right. So at this time, I'm going to have staff take the chairs. Patrick, Russ, come on up. Everybody up. Kathy, if you can make just some jot down, make sure we capture all these questions that are coming our way. So if there's anything we need to follow up on that we can't answer right now, we certainly will. For the sake of the folks maybe watching this live and or streaming this later today, tomorrow, or whenever, if you would be kind enough, if you do have questions, to utilize this microphone so we can get that recorded into this session. Name, serial number, social security number, bank account, no. Just your name and your rec card number would be perfect. And we're here to answer any and all questions that you may have.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, my name's Maria DeMeo, and my rec number is 130696. My husband and I have been a resident here for 4 years, and we did take quite a long time to decide to come here. And we're glad we did. And this is my first budget meeting that I'm attending. And there's just some feedback I want to be able to share with the team, and then hopefully change or provide some improvements for people like us who want to learn about our community and how to make it better and where the money's going. So a lot of great projects. I love it. I think there's some great things that we're working on and we need to improve. And there's other things that I don't quite understand, so wanted to get a little more background on. But one of the things I'd like to see coming from corporate America is we always have information about like all the departments have a duty to reduce cost, whether that's 5% per year, 10% per year, whatever it is. I've never worked in a nonprofit, so I don't know if that's different than corporate America, but there's always something for us shareholders or us members that we see that the company or the organization is looking out for the best interest of its members or shareholders and showing us where they're making these improvements, but we've also reduced top line or bottom line cost, and here's what it is, and this is what it means for you. Because since we've been here, we see an increase in cost all the time, and we don't understand it and don't see it, and this helps a little bit, but I'd like to see that you guys are also fighting for us to reduce those costs as well. And last year was great, but I'd like to see more of it, because with inflation coming up, we're going to see more increases, and maybe it's not within our control, but what is this board doing to whether look at the project numbers? Do we need to do all the project at hand? Are we bidding out more? Are we looking at creative resources to fill some of the needs that we have? And I'd just like to see more of that. So I don't know who to address that to, but.
We are absolutely wide open to those kinds of comments and concerns. And yeah, absolutely. Feel free to come back up if you have any more comments. But one of the things that I want to touch on just a little bit, anybody else wants to chime in too, if you've got any specifics that you want to talk about, that's all fine. But what we try to do, and I think one of the unique things about working in a nonprofit, I've come from 30 plus years in government, and you're on the corporate side. This is my first dabble at, nonprofit. But one of the unique things I think that really kind of, when you started talking about the owner members or the shareholders and that type of thing, it really is owner member based. A lot of the things that we do, whether they're because one of the key things that I think it was touched on a little bit today by some of the presenters, and that's the word committee. And we have several, right? Whether it's the golf committee, our budget and finance committee, our club committee, sports pavilion committee, those types of things. And those are made up of owner members. And so when we begin talking about needs, wants, issues, and those types of things, they are very, very involved in what we do on a monthly basis. So those agendas get full, and we like to publicly discuss a lot of the things that we're doing. This isn't staff working in a dark room putting a budget together, right? This is pretty transparent. But I hear what you're saying, and I don't know if anybody else wants to comment on some of the cost savings that we've kind of have dealt with along the way, but maybe we need to do a better job presenting that. I appreciate that. Thank you.
I'd like to add too that what Bill touched upon with committees is that Russ and I, as the facilities leaders, Russ managing the whole entire team, and myself, the new capital, if you will, or repair and replacement, anything over $5,000. On a yearly basis, the budget starts with a look at the reserve study management tool. So Pete said that we have an average of 12 to 1,300 line items in that tool that are reviewed on a yearly basis. Not necessarily every line item, but every line item comes up in observance over infinity, technically. And it tells us what our useful life is. So when you have the next fiscal year's budget being started and developed, that's the first thing we look at is what has met its useful life. And Russ and I literally go to every department manager and ask them, has it met its useful life? Does this carpet really need to be replaced just because it came up in the tool? And in most cases, it gets bumped. Now, in some cases, it's not wise to bump because inflationary costs might impact it greater than buying an extra year or two. But that's how the budget from a capital side begins its development stage. And when that meeting process of over about a month is completed, we have the R&R, the repair and replacement portion of that budget, formal. And then from there, throughout the year, following our project planning process, which is a policy, it's in our governing board docs, anybody, yourself, a club, a governing board member, can come to the table with an idea and present it to staff, and that goes through a policy following process. Initial approval, is it worth chasing? And then we put a number to that. And that's where those committees really come in key, because new is that tripping component. It's the part that we don't know what somebody's gonna ask for the next business year. And once it's gone through charter clubs, if it came from charter clubs, then it moves on to the properties committee for their review and opinion. And then it goes to budget and finance, and finally to the governing board. And if they give their thumbs up, then it gets implemented into the budget for the general manager to receive December 1st. So I hope that helps. There's a lot of tools that we work with, and we definitely work with people. So I always say that none of these projects are mine until they're approved. So they've come from great ideas or needs of our community. So I hope that helps a little.
And just to touch on a couple of things, we've got two division heads here that, be it Russ Boston and Todd Patty, who Russ's team, as far as facility maintenance goes, what they do and perform for us on a daily basis as far as facility repair, what we can tackle in-house from the cost savings perspective is tremendous. Looking at a comparable to maybe having to bring an outside source in to get some work done. I mean, from building tables to repairing all kinds of things indoor. Russ's team is incredibly skilled as far as trades go. And then Todd, if you two can also touch on a lot of the cost savings that we deal with on the golf courses. But what we're a little handcuffed with currently is, I mean, Todd's down about 20 people. And that, again, we are a people service organization, and employment is tough to find. Todd had a new hire as early as this week and went out and took care of a green and raked a couple of traps and never saw them again. So it's hard work. When the summertime comes and the temperatures rise, people go away. So it's a tough challenge.
So just to touch on a little bit what Carl was talking about, the need for replacement, and I did talk about it in the presentation as far as golf course equipment. You know, we review that list every year, and if there's items on that list, we're going to push it out several years. It would be so easy to take that reserve study and say, okay, we're going to get all this new equipment. And I know there are golf courses out there that work off of a reserve study, not here in this community, that have that replacement program, and they could just go ahead and get that new equipment. But we analyze each piece of equipment that's up for replacement, and if we can get another year or 2 or 3 years out of it, we will. And I credit that to our mechanics. They do a great job of their preventative maintenance program, keeping things in good condition and running. So that's just one part of our department that we do to conserve money or to save money. We bid everything out. We have a certain dollar amount requirement, but we pretty much bid out everything. We'll bid out a bag of fertilizer if we think we can save $10 on it. We do that. But everything's going up. Fertilizer, chemicals, seed. Bill touched on that in the presentation. Irrigation parts, everything. So we're just trying to hold our own. We just don't want to see our conditions slide downhill, is what we're trying to do. So we're just trying to maintain what we have out there as you see it today as far as the quality of golf courses.
Thank you. I appreciate your responses. So can I just, a couple of things since you just finished with yours. Like COVID, we all had to take sort of make decisions or do things we normally wouldn't do, right? Because that was for the good of the community and what was going on. Given the fertilizer prices, given the inflation, given all these other things, would this be something the committee would look at to say, although we need to maintain the greens and we need to maintain all these things, perhaps this year we tighten our belt a little bit and maybe we won't do some of those projects because that's the environment that we're in right now and we have no control over it with fertilizer fees. Like someone's at 130% increase. Like that's ridiculous, right? So are there other options? That was just one question. But two things that I heard today were their two biggest expenses were utilities and wages, right? So for utilities, question for someone out there is, you know, we're trying to be greener, we're looking at conserving. Have we thought about like putting solar panels or something to generate our own electricity and to save costs that way? And we can protect the environment and the asphalt and stuff because it's being covered. I don't know, that kind of stuff. And for wages, are we looking at, you know you said you guys bid, but are we looking at bidding even more with the insurance companies to say, let them fight against each other to give you guys the best price, or look at alternatives for employment? I mean, how about us as can we volunteer for things? Like, we are also members, and maybe you've got all this free labor here you don't even know you have, but because we want to be part of the solution too. Have you thought about things like that? Because I don't want to work, but I'll volunteer if you guys need help, if it's for the better of the community and it reduces our costs. So just some thought. We are looking at tightening our belts, maybe not doing as much to the golf communities that we could do, just in the short term, like we had to do for COVID. In the short term, we had to make sacrifices.
If I could, as far as fertilizer goes, we are looking at different types of fertilizers, maybe some organic fertilizers that we could use. And then also we're going to be experimenting with rates, maybe cutting back, maybe not a full rate. Maybe we could go with 3/4 pound of nitrogen and get the same results. So those are things that we're looking at as well.
Gail Matson, 117215. There was an article in the latest newsletter that suggested that bad decisions made by you people cost us millions of dollars in the past couple of years. I would like you to address that.
I can turn that over to our finance division. That was, I believe, in the opinion section. And opinion and fact are two different things. And so I'm not really sure how to answer that specifically. I don't have the article in front of me, but there was a claim, I think, within that opinion section regarding a grant that cost us money. I'm not sure really how to address that other than on the onset of COVID. There was a new federal program that came out that offered a payroll protection plan, right? We did not know if we were eligible at all for that. We had contacted our state representatives. We had contacted some folks at the series of banks that we participate in, our governing board and committees, and our attorney, who also applied for a grant for his firm as well. And everything was new. The rule book, the ink hadn't even dried yet on the rule book when these grant applications came out. We applied. We were told to apply. We were encouraged to apply. It wasn't a Bill Schwind decision. It wasn't anyone on this table making that firm decision. It was in unison with our governing board and people that we were talking to from the legal perspective on it. We applied for that grant, which basically said, if you do not terminate employees and keep retention of people, you will get reimbursed for their salary. We didn't want to terminate people. The cost of terminating people is very expensive. They go away, we don't know if they'll come back, right? So we apply for the grant. The initial funding scenario, we were not awarded. And several months go by, and I come to work one day, and there's a coffee mug on my desk with $2.3 million in it. Terrific. We think we can reimburse our employees. We consult our attorney. We consult the banks. They're still unsure if we qualify, right? But the federal government issued checks. So we didn't cash the check, but we didn't terminate people either. We kept them working. So while the facilities were closed for a short period of time, we had them deep cleaning. Our golf courses, they did close for public play, but Todd moved his maintenance system up that we normally do in the springtime anyway to transition golf courses from winter to spring. He moved those up to those 3 weeks we were shut down. We were having large groups of people congregate at the pro shops, causing problems. And we could not get them to comply for various reasons. And we didn't know, as COVID was brand new, the most affected age group that we were hearing from the National News Service and others in the medical field, talking to our local fire department and our local hospital representatives, is that folks over 65 were pretty much a targeted age group. We didn't want that to happen. We wanted to protect the owner members here. So please do the 6 feet spacing, play by the rules as all we can ask you to do. If you want to do it, fine. If not, oh well. Same thing with mask wearing. So we had to do what we felt was the right thing to do to help protect our employees that are working in those environments being congregated upon, as well as the people golfing. It wasn't a popular decision. Interviewed by the news, local news channels. I don't like seeing myself on the 6 o'clock news, right? And so for a short period of time, we did shut down, but maintenance didn't stop. Russ's teams and all of our part-time labor were continuing to work here, they were building plexiglass barriers for the face-to-face contacts we have in membership, at the pro shops, and other facilities that we manage. So we were keeping people employed. And so that kind of transpired, and off we go, and things kind of relax, and the CDC and the state of Arizona and Maricopa County Health are kind of guiding us as to how we should maybe proceed through this thing. No one knew. And so as things progressed, right, if there was no COVID, we would have had those expenses anyway. These are still our employees. We are still, the biggest cost of our electrical scenario is running Todd's pumps. It's not our air conditioners here. It's not closing down facilities. It's irrigating the golf courses and circulating water in swimming pools. We could have turned those off, and the pools could have got filled with algae, and that would have been great. And we would have had all that other expense cleaning pools before we open and operate again. So we kept things going. It was an operational expense. It didn't cost us any money. And so the check was just stashed in a safe. And then when we did our audit at the end of the year, our auditor also applied for a PPP loan that they weren't eligible for. They returned it too, as did our attorney, as did lots of people who were not eligible. We didn't know we were ineligible. So when we found out legally that we had to return that money, we did. An uncashed check. So, yes, ma'am. C4, yeah. And so one person's opinion versus an organizational fact are two very different things. And so it's very, very hard to, battle that type of scenario, right? You shouldn't get into an argument in a newspaper. People that pay for ink in a barrel tend to win those. But if that individual or any individual like yourself has that question, that's what we're here for. Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you. And again, our committees meet monthly. This isn't an administrative staff that we make these decisions independently. I mean, there are a few day-to-day decisions that do get taken care of, but primarily large decisions that deal with anything from $5,000 to $50,000 or higher are typically discussed in open forum and very, very transparent. So, again, any questions that you want to have addressed, we are more than happy to do so, and the folks here are more than happy to share any information that we have with you. We work for you. Thank you.
Bill, I would like to add that while we were closed, even though we didn't turn circulation pumps off, we set all HVAC. Thank you. And we turned all the heaters off. Because heaters are not needed to circulate the pool. So like Bill said, we didn't want them to go green, but there's no sense in heating a pool if nobody's there to swim. So, thank you.
Bill Weaver, 124087. Is the budget available online?
No. Once it's approved, then we post it.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, at any of we've had at least 10 open forums where all these levels of detail have been provided. BNF would be your best bet.
Okay.
If you have any board workshop.
And I'm just wondering, I don't remember what the original number was for Grandview, but the 6.6 million. The other 6 courses, and is that going to be a tremendous hit to the reserve fund?
Fortunately, no. The impact that was felt the most was not on the irrigation portion of our reserve study. It was done because deturfing costs have skyrocketed. The way I understand it, the overlay in the deturfed areas will be granite. That's seen probably, Todd, help me out, I believe it was 100% increase in the last year. Floral, all the cactus and plants and shrubs and trees are all seeing significant increases. So, to the other 6 courses, as Bill alluded to earlier, most of them are compliant with the level of acreage that is allowed by the ADWR, so we won't have to incur those components on those courses.
Okay.
Yeah, if I could real quick, I talked about the 40 acres of turf reduction over at Grandview. As we get into the other golf courses, Pebblebrook, Echo Mesa, and Stardust, that does go down. We're looking at probably 17 acres over at Pebblebrook, which is our next large course, about 150 acres, and then it goes down from there, about 11 acres over at Echo Mesa and 6 acres at Stardust. And so we figured that acreage would put us in compliance when we get to 2025. So again, the big one is Grandview with the 40 acres and the cost of turf removal. So it is going to go down a little bit.
Okay. Regarding the IT, you mentioned fiber by Cox. Are you aware of another company that I've just seen information on called Wired that is wiring Sun City West with fiber? And their rates are approximately, at least what they're claiming, about probably 60% of what Cox is charging us today. And it'll be fiber, and it will be 5 gig maybe. So it's extremely high speed and fiber to the house.
And they're running their own fiber and not
Yes.
running, really?
It's spelled WYERD, and I saw an office with that logo on it, Cross Grand near Trader Joe's, and I think it was in that strip there, or it's just by Meeker. I don't remember which. That's where their office is.
Right. So keep in mind, commercial, residential. It took us a long time to get on the bandwagon with Cox because they did not supply commercial infrastructure. Thank you. So now that they do, and I think we've been with Cox for 10 plus years, they want to now improve that, so they're replacing all their existing with the fiber. So I will look into that to make sure, but I'm pretty sure that's going to be residential only.
Okay, I just wanted to make you aware if you weren't aware of it. It's
thank you.
New as far as I could find out. Oh, this may or may not be budget, but I just wanted to ask the question, and this potentially a rumor, just what I heard. I understand that members of Briarwood are expecting a $5,000 to $10,000 assessment for their returf and irrigation in the near future. And also, I'm just wondering if this is an issue for Briarwood and perhaps Hillcrest inside of the confines. I would venture to guess something, and even the Hillcrest may even collapse if they have to do something the way they're funded and owned. And I just wanted to raise the issue because I'm sure it would have an impact on Sun City West if one of them went under or tried to sell housing in it or whatever.
You are correct on the impact. I mean, it affects all golf courses. We've been in communication with some folks that are on the other side of the river, be it Sun City. They've got a particular golf course that currently is over 200 acres. So eliminating 120 acres of turf on a particular golf course is a challenge that they are up against. So we do communicate, with them and kind of see how things are going, and as well as other golf courses, whether they're in Scottsdale or Phoenix and otherwise. But yeah, I mean, it's a game changer when it comes to water conservation. But seeing what we're seeing with the water situation and how water is delivered throughout the state of Arizona, we just got to play by those rules. Yeah, I'll leave that at that.
Yes, Claudia Gayhart, 118852. We've been here about 8 years now, and I'm noticing that this is probably the biggest dues increase that I've seen in the 8 years I've lived here. How did you arrive at a $28 fee? Is that for 2021 in arrears to kind of make up the difference? Or maybe you could explain that.
Probably the biggest component, as I mentioned during my presentation, was labor. And you don't have to look around very, very far, and maybe I'll fill you in on a piece of detail that I think Cliff was close to stating, but our job wage scales are published. You can see them online. We had our full-time entry level was at about $13.20 for our lowest, so to speak, wage scale. So as Cliff was alluding to, you don't have to look far to see not just Amazon, virtually every other competing organization, and up to and including the Grand across the street has a $15 entry level. So you saw the FTE count, and I don't quite bluntly think that tells the whole picture, and goes back to a little bit of a response to the lady was asking about the article in the paper, which was that we maintained at the 300 or 291 FTEs, not by just always having COVID reductions, but we are constantly analyzing our FTEs. Every time we have an opening, we analyze whether or not the need is there for the replacement. Sadly, that doesn't work very well in golf maintenance and landscaping and some of the facility assistant positions. They are remaining open, or as Bill alluded to, they're getting limited amount of time spent in the position before they say, this is not worth it, I can go over here. So the budget and finance is our first foray that we presented to them, that our commitment to getting ourselves equivalent on at least the pay range, and we do have some other benefits that we've been working on, which is, say, 401k. We have a profit sharing plan. It's called that, but essentially it's works similar to a 401k infusion into the retirement plan, and then the vesting schedules were changed and when you could become eligible. All these to improve our retention and our recruitment. But the big hitter of all is on July 1, essentially taking that 13.20 and moving it to 15, and then we call it compression. But everybody else, of course, then generally speaking, has to be moved up in accordance with that. And again, we're doing that on an individual basis, so we don't just blanket do that, but that's our biggest investment. And we believe that that's bring tremendous value to you as owner members to make sure that we're covered.
So the $28 increase then doesn't have anything to do with the lack of flat fees from last year. It's based on the increases that were in expenses that we're facing this year in 23.
We bring that up as a point, but it does not. Everything we present out there is based upon what we need to still infuse that. Again, I bring this up, but that $1.4 million is a really critical component of the reserve funds. I use this analogy, and I think it resonates with most people. I know the CFO over at Grand. and they're 16, I'm just rough numbering, $1,600 or $1,700 annual dues. They actually have a dedicated line within their dues to go to the repair and replacement. And it's not insignificant. It's about $400 per housetop. Ours doesn't have that direct infusion. By policy, essentially the $497 each individual pays. There's nothing that says $1 or $500 of it goes towards repair and replacement. The operating margin by policy does go to that. So if you do some rough numbers, the million, let's just say it's $1.5 million divided by 30,000 or so residents, that's $30 per person, or $50, excuse me, per person that is essentially infused into the reserve funds when it's all said and done. And that $50 into 500 is 10%. So over $1,000, it's 25%. And here it's 10. So we think you're getting tremendous value. And that's, again, I can't reiterate if you have to have that as part of the reserve funds, or it'll have to be made up in other areas such as APFs or cutting back on those capital expenditures. And I think time would tell you that when you do that and you don't stay ahead of it, inflation tends to gobble up everything you delay. So we'd have to do all these analytics behind the scenes, and it's not always easy to do a rubber stamp of here's why. But I would argue that we do usually present this in Torch. We usually present it in our budget and finance about the history of dues increase. And I'm not disputing what you're saying, but it's my recollection that it was probably well into the 2015, maybe Brian, you might know, I think it was 2014 when there was like a 10 or maybe even a 15% hike after years of going up and down at these volatile 0%, then 15 and 0, then 15. And we strive very diligently to try to keep it on a parallel. And I'm pretty sure that we're on at least a 6 or 7 year run rate where over time it's been in the 3% range. And then if, to your point, if you did average the last 2 years, then we are 3, but that wasn't the reason we did the 5.6 this year.
You're probably talking right about the time that we came here.
Yeah.
And we moved from Grand. So, I didn't see that large.
And I'm not defending it, but I would argue to your point that you see inflation, the CPI is upwards of 7.9%. The Social Security increased 5.8%. We were very diligent in our assessment of every line item, and while we didn't bring it up during this presentation, every single line item gets brought to our managers for, yes, there's some historical history, but we challenge them as to the need, and there are cost of savings. We just didn't highlight them here for you. They'd be too numerous to mention, but we actually believe that we're coming in below some of the run rates of the inflation, CPI increases, and in the Social Security, and we very much were attuned to that. And but we do need to invest in our staff, or a lot of this could deteriorate rather rapidly.
Now, the one other question about the APFs. We touched on them earlier in your presentation, but and you said they're comparable in other areas.
I'll highlight that, sure.
How close is comparable?
Sure. The two around us, Sun City for quite a while was 3,500. With their January fiscal year date, they did increase to 4,000. So that's there. And Grand, just a little bit of history on them. They used to be tied to their dues. So when I arrived here in 2019, when I talked to them, the maximum they could ever do for an APF fee was $1,600 or whatever the dues rates were. So they went to a bylaw change and got that resoundingly approved by the owner members to not affix it to the dues anymore, but to establish a rate. And they then went to the $3,500 rate. So we're very much comparable with the two main ones around us.
Okay, thank you.
Our overall budget analysis, these are the big hitters as far as what's really affecting us. today. And that's just something that, you know, we hope in time goes away, particularly supply chain impacts and that type of thing. No real idea on that. But you know, the health insurance premiums and the labor shortages and the wage adjustments, you know, when the state tells us what minimum wage is, and we have, like I said, when we have a couple hundred individuals working for us here on a part-time basis, you know, that's an impact. And when the state says we have to raise their fee to X, we do. And so those are the things that are really calculated in here. And the other slide that I think was, pertinent to what we were talking about here is you can kind of see a little decline in 1920, i.e. the COVID scenario. So our revenues were impacted, not so much on the membership side, but a lot of special events and activities were postponed. We didn't do them because of COVID and gathering and that type of thing. So a lot of our activities and events took a hit. You know, bowling took a hit, golf. And so we are, you know, rebounding nicely. But when we kept our fees flat, we were operating okay. We still managed a positive return. But if you can see, you know, over the last 10-year average, it was a drop of about $1 million going into our reserve fund. And so this is kind of how we operate and how we plan for the future, and making sure that all these facilities here are taken care of.
I could have, I'll give you an easy one. You're still projecting a large rate of golf rounds. And I want to compare that with something else that had a huge increase during the COVID. It was Netflix. And Netflix is taking a dump now. I guess I would just suggest we need to keep our eye on golf, that it doesn't also return to pre-COVID trends, and so that we're always keeping an eye on making sure we're giving the best to the best or whatever.
Thanks for the question, Bill. You're right. Those are variables that we look at, and rounds increased. Prior year rounds were 326,000. This budget reflects 320,000. So we're being fairly conservative with that, but that's what we'll watch, and we'll pay attention to that and learn from that as well.
Folks, I'd like to add too that just as an example, we have a project that was approved in last year's budget, which is the Palm Ridge wainscoting at the pool area, and due to costs and availability of materials, that project is being placed on hold, which creates an efficiency, of course. It doesn't solve the beautification problem, but to force the issue and accept the higher costs and deviate from a good choice in materials, we have made a decision to pause that project. So when COVID came around, we sat around this table as staff and looked very diligently over at all the projects that were approved, and fortunately we got to carry the day and get everything accomplished in a year. But we are always open to putting a project on hold. Just because it's approved doesn't mean that it's absolutely necessary to move forward. You know, when we talk about things like asphalt projects, it's a difficult decision because inflation it's a guarantee that that's going to affect that. But some of our parking lots also aren't just going to disappear tomorrow just because they're crumbling here and there. So those decisions and thoughts are made every year, and just because a project is approved doesn't always necessarily mean that we would carry that day with getting it accomplished just because. So just little information on how we look at our scheduling for the year too.
Al Patterson, 113390. I had a question. You were talking about over at Beardsley where one of those spots was getting broken into all the time. Was anybody ever convicted or found, or anything happened on that? And I'm wondering about that raises the second question of security in our community. I love this community, been here for 12 years, but I see some people riding around on bikes in the middle of the night, and the questions of golf cart theft. And I'm just wondering if there's any issue, or whose responsibility it would be to make our community a little more secure, and what you're doing with cameras in parking lots or anything like that.
So that's a hot topic between Bill and I. Bill has lit a fire under me. I am not a proponent for cameras because based on my 30 years here, what cameras have proven is, yes, there's somebody stealing our stuff, but unless you can identify who that somebody is, or you have somebody monitoring that camera that can go out and tackle him, he's gone. So you've accomplished nothing. And it's a huge waste of money. So we are looking at, if we're going to get into cameras, we want them to have some teeth. So we're working on that to get some numbers across. But in the meantime, I would suggest, I've seen a lot of golf carts come up missing. I've also noticed a lot more shackles on tires because people are tired of it. It's super easy to steal a golf cart. If you don't have a special key, one key fits all. They just get in and drive away. Posse comes around and they do a route. And the routes are pretty much, all they do is have to time them, and they know. But you're right, they are out prowling around on bikes. They hit the easy things. Pat had an instance where we had a crew going around breaking into the range ball machines, stealing the change. We finally had one turn around and look up at the camera. We were able to ID him, and we prosecuted. But that was one, and it was some loose change. So unfortunately, they get away with a lot heavier stuff. Broke into Grandview Pro Shop twice. We improved the camera system, so the second time we were able to see two guys break in the window, and again, couldn't identify who they were, so it did us no good. So there's some of the issues we're facing to achieve what you're speaking of.
We do meet with Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. There are representatives here. There are unmarked cars in the neighborhood when they talk to us about things that we are dealing with. Russ can touch on this a little bit, but we have Beardsley Park, for instance, has a very, very close proximity to the river bottom. And as you know, there's a large community of people living in the river bottom. And so we have people sharing our picnic ramadas at Beardsley Park at night. We had to sign all kinds of contracts recently with Maricopa County Sheriffs on trespassing, because if you don't address this issue with them, and there's legal steps you have to take for them to run someone off your property, after notice number 2, they can get arrested. So that is being addressed on an ongoing basis, and we're glad for that. But it's just a matter of, we are, again, I made reference to it early in the presentation. I mean, we're pretty big, for an HOA, for a planned community, and we do not have, an internal police department that has any kind of legal authority to arrest and that type of thing. So we're kind of at the mercy of Maricopa County, but we do our best to communicate with them and get them involved as best we can. And they do, I think, a pretty good job there. But just to touch on a couple of scenarios, whether it's Valentine's Day or Mother's Day, we do see a lot of loss of plant life in our plant settings. People dig up flowers along the way, and we see that. Todd planted, I don't know how many trees last year in the little alcoves along R.H. Johnson, and those, as soon as they were planted, they were uplifted and put in people's yards. So we deal with that. It's amazing, but the web we weave is amazing, and they're local homeowners, I guess. I mean, we used your money to purchase the trees. I guess they think they're theirs, and we can put them in their yard. So we deal with all kinds of wonderful funk like that. And this slide, Carl didn't mention, but these were the old access points when this place was being built. This was what Del Webb used to kind of bring in all of their equipment and whatnot to get a lot of things built. But there we sit as far as the gates still remain. So we're getting those fixed, and we hope that kind of curtails some of that problem as well. But, you know, crime is something we don't want to brag about, but we certainly want to make sure we pay attention to it.
Yeah, I understand that, and I know that our community does a really good job on that. I still think that cameras in some locations, repeat offenders, I know you can't grab them right now, but at least you've got it on film.
Yes.
And maybe the same people are repeating, and you can go after them.
He's on my team.
And I've also heard people in our community, one other thing, say that, yeah, the acreage reduction on the golf courses is great, but you're replacing it with a whole bunch of plants and stuff that are going to cost a bunch of money to water. And I'm one that's with you guys, but what's the answer to that question?
Well, we are looking, our plant list, I call them low water or no water use plant material that we're putting around the golf course. So we're very selective in that. They will need a little bit of water until they're established, and a lot of those plants will be able to turn them off and just abandon the water source, and then they'll be able to survive without. So, yeah, that was one thing that we did look at. We didn't want to have plants that require a lot of maintenance or use a lot of water. Same with the trees as well.
And there, again, Arizona State or Department of Water Resources has a resource there on their webpage that talks about low water use plants, and they have an approved list of what to use. And so if you want to look at decorative color or dressing up your own yard or whatnot, you can see a great opportunity for desert-style plants that use little to no water.
No, I'll just have an answer for the people that have been telling me that you're going to use a lot of water.
No.
So, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Comments? Suggestions? Our doors are open. Come find us anytime. You can email us. And again, if you have any interest at all, and I thank you all for being here, there are always seats on our committees, whether they're finance, whether they're club related or facility related. We'd love to have you. And again, they're all filled with bodies of folks that live here, pay their dues, and look out for the community, and as we do too. So thank you.